I'm Sue Brayne, and 8 years ago, my marriage ended. It was one of the great shocks and sadnesses of my life, but it was because of the loss that I went through that's enabled me to do the work that I do now.
Hello, you're listening to the Silent Why podcast, and we're your hosts, Claire Sands
and Chris Sands.
And we're super excited to be finally launching the first episode of our very own podcast.
We've been thinking and planning this podcast for a while now, but we've finally nailed a subject we feel passionate about, and we can't wait to get started.
Episode 1!
Hurrah! Through the Silent Why, we're exploring an area of life that every single human has experienced or will experience. Loss.
We've experienced loss ourselves through our journey of childlessness, and we've seen how beauty can come from brokenness. But we want to know if it's possible to find that in every type of loss.
So we've begun a mission to find 101 different types of loss, and we're going to chat to people who've experienced each one to see if beauty and hope have appeared for them too. Think it's possible in all 101 losses?
Let's find out. A bit more about who we are, check out our trailer or episode 3, where we'll be sharing a bit more about one of our own losses, childlessness.
We're kicking off this first episode with Sue Brayne, who we spoke to about the loss of her marriage.
Sue is an author, speaker and the host of the podcast Embracing Your Mortality.
I thought I knew it all. I thought, being a bereavement counsellor and a bereavement therapist, I knew what grief was. No, I did not. But I do now.
Sue experienced 2 life-changing events. The first was when she survived a light aircraft crash, and the second when her marriage suddenly ended.
Her own journey led her to help others embrace their mortality, using research, workshops, books, including ones that help parents and young children talk about death. So here we go, episode 1.
Exciting!
We kicked the interview off by asking Sue what a normal week looks like for her.
My everyday life is always very mixed. It depends on what's... Because I work for myself, I have that luxury of choosing my own schedule or doing what I want to do. But I'm very disciplined. So if I am writing something, I sit down and I write it until it's done. Because I'm also a podcast host as well as a speaker and an author. So I've got a really nice mixture of stuff that I do, and I'm very happy doing that.
From the bits that I've heard about you and read about you as well, I think what is clear is a real love of going deep into how people think, how people behave, whether that's sort of through choices or not. So just tell us a little bit about what it is about you that makes you fascinated by others and some of the deeper subjects that we can sometimes put to one side.
Oh, gosh. Well, the work in end of life and death and dying, my whole work is about helping people to talk about end of life, death and dying, mortality in a better way. That is the work that I've been called to do. And it really started when I was a child, because I just knew I was going to die one day. It was just a complete knowing. And I think that's kind of shaped my life a lot, that understanding. I think it sort of led me to train as a nurse initially. So around about the age of 18, and all nurses do this, by the way. It wasn't just, it's not special to me, but, I was laying out my first dead bodies when I was 18 and just being fascinated by the whole human condition and what makes us who we are and why. And I think that the sort of 3 years of nursing that I did and a little bit after I qualified just really opened up this curiosity. I am a deeply curious person into people's stories, because everybody's got a story, everybody. And, you meet somebody and you see the facade and just a little bit deeper, and then the story unfolds and it's just like, oh my goodness, that's who you are. So that's always been like that for me. And I've always been really drawn to sort of a more spiritual understanding of life, and what does spirituality mean to us, and what does it give us? And that's been a huge focus of my life. I don't even want to call it spirituality anymore. I kind of use the word conscious, or being awake to life. I think that's more how I put it these days. And it's just guided me. I've just felt very guided all my life, to turn right here, or go straight on, or turn left, or meeting a person that completely changes everything for me. And that's what happened when I actually met my husband. I was doing an MA in the rhetoric and rituals of death. And it was just the most fantastic year at Winchester. And I'd never been to university before, but I'd written books. And I just got called to go to university. I knew I had to go to university, and I wanted to study end of life and death and dying. I just knew I did. I was 46 at the time. I was living in Wimborne in those days, and the only course available was at Southampton, just down the road, and it had the MA in the rhetoric and rituals of death. And because I'd written books, they accepted me straight on to the MA. But I'd never written anything academically. So that was a big learning curve for me, I can tell you. And then I just so happened that the thesis that I really felt drawn to write about, and do not ask me why, but this is what came to me. I wanted to look at the impact that death and dying had on war correspondence. Now, I'd never met a war correspondent in my life, but anyway, that's what I did. And my lovely supervisor said, "You can't do this. There's in those days, there's no research done on that." And I said, "Well, I don't care. I'm going to do it." And the only other person then who'd, by the time I got my MA, who also had an MA in this very subject, we were the only two people in the world then, was the man I married. We met through doing our MAs. It was bizarre. And he'd been a correspondent with the BBC. So we had this incredible sort of wow in common. And then, things happened from there, really.
That's incredible. So that fascination that you had with death, was that just like an intellectual thing, or had you experienced loss yourself?
No, I'd experienced it. Well, I had been involved about when I was 36, about 30 years ago. I was involved in a light aircraft crash. And that completely changed my life, because it just completely woke me up to understanding the fragility of life and what my mortality meant to me. And also in those days I was in the kind of film industry, on the edges of the film industry, and it just life wasn't really working, and I just sitting beside the wreckage of the plane, it was just like, oh my God, I've got to do something about my life, because I can't go on like this. And that really woke me up to my healing journey. And that always led me in all the way along the line. It was always about working with people who'd been bereaved or grieving or frightened of death. And that led me in time to do the MA. And then I trained as a psychotherapist myself. Yeah.
I don't want to take us off topic too much, but I am just always thought to myself about when you hear things like plane crashes, those moments before, whether it's connected with death or the end, what went through your mind in those moments when you realised that all was not well?
Well, I was just saying goodbye to everybody I knew in my head. Because when the propellers just stopped going round, and it was a beautiful, beautiful August evening, and I was being piloted by a friend. It was his plane, and we'd been off to see his girlfriend, and we were flying back to London, actually. And I don't know why, but the propeller stopped going round, and I thought he was mucking about. I thought, you bugger. And then I just saw the blood just drain out of his face, and thinking, oh my God, this is really serious. And he started sending out Mayday calls, and all I did, I just froze, and I just thought, well, this is it. This is it. Because there was just nowhere to land, because you don't realise how wooded England is, And anyway, bless his heart, he got us down we crash landed into an army field. And then all these army guys are running towards us with fire extinguishers. So, and then I just remember the pilot saying to me, get out, the plane's going to blow up. And that was just like, oh my God, that was really scary.
How do you feel about flying now?
Hate it.
Because of that experience?
I think it's a mixture of everything now. I think it's not just that. I think it's also, the ecology, being responsible for our environment. And I think that there's a huge package for me going on now. I would prefer never to have to fly again.
Do you think it's safe to say that it takes an experience like that to bring you to the thoughts that you had, or do you think you could have those thoughts with a lesser experience?
When I run workshops or do talks, sometimes people ask that question, and the answer is, you do not have to have a plane crash to wake up to who you are. You do not. Please don't have one. It's horrid. But a lot of people now are really becoming much more aware of themselves through meditation, for example, or singing in choirs, or, being drawn to some, when those questions of who am I? What am I here for? They, that sort of sense of I need to find out. And I'm really grateful to the plane crash now. Really grateful.
There's a very specific element of your life that and not the plane crash, that you've worked through and learnt from and processed. Tell us a bit about that chapter.
Yeah, well, it was the end of my marriage to the person that who I met through my MA. We married late. I was just edging 50 when we married. And we were together for 13 years. And I think we did jolly well together, actually. It's always difficult. Second marriages can often be really quite challenging with children and, stepping into, certainly I never wanted to parent his children, or he never wanted to parent mine, but, taking a role as the step parent. Anyway, I really felt that we were going to make it for the rest of our lives, and we built a beautiful house, and we had a really good life, actually. And I think because I was so enjoying being married and living the life that we were living and I was living, I just missed the signs. I think I didn't want to see them. And then it was literally overnight. He went back to his first wife. And we were 13 years together, and it was utterly, utterly devastating. That's no other word for it, really. And the loss wasn't just about him going back to his first wife. I mean, it wasn't just that. I lost my home that I thought I was going to be carried out in a coffin from. I lost the life that I imagined I was going to live. And I lost my mate, who I thought I was going to grow old with. And then on top of it, all the financial stuff when you split up is really tough. And finding new homes. It was on a par of the plane crash, but with knobs on. I've had shocking stuff in our life. We all have. That one took the biscuit.
Do you know why particularly that took the biscuit? What was it? Just because there was so many elements to the loss?
Yeah, I think it was kind of, what the hell do I do with my life now? I wasn't frightened. Was I frightened? I think I was so shocked that took precedence for months. And there was an insistence to sell our family house very, very, very quickly. So from the time it ended, which was, I think, March the 11th, I'll never forget the day, to selling the house, that was in August the 21st. And then he remarried again in November. So it was it was just like my entire life was just, it was just like I was just ripped apart. That's the only way I can explain it, really. But I think, I'm not the only one that this happens to. And I know a lot of women are leaving their husbands later in life as well. So, this isn't just a woman's story. I mean, it's my story, obviously, but it isn't just I don't feel victimised by it. I just feel that's what happened. But, without that happening, I would not be sitting here today or doing the work that I do. What I did was I bought a house very quickly just to shove all my stuff in. And I had a lovely cat called Dewey, and she was my companion and my mate. And I lay in bed with her one day and I went, Dewey, what are we going to do now? And it just went boom, I'm going to go and buy a narrowboat. So that's what I did. I went and bought a narrowboat, and I went off travelling the canals for 3.5 years. And the narrowboat was just like my cradle, my crying cradle. And I just spent hours tied up along the towpath, wailing. Did I cry? But the thing is, I knew, the weird thing was when he left, I knew it was the right thing. Deep down inside me, really deep down, it was just like, look, it's going to be a rough ride right now, but this is going to turn out for the best. I promise you. It was one of those higher self things. And so being on the narrowboat was just perfect, because I was a solo boater, and it's really hard physical work being a solo boater when you're travelling. Really hard work. And I just felt that I got so fit physically, and that kind of sustained this complete falling apart. But I was crying for my life, really, and all the stuff that hadn't worked out, and all the disappointments I'd had in my life, and why hadn't I married at the age of, 17, and been with the same partner all my life and had millions of grandchildren, and, lived in the same house, all those kind of dreams that, that sort of filled my head of why had my life turned out like this? And it just threw me into myself like nothing ever had. Nothing.
And while this is going on, how much are you thinking through, well, I've been trained in this, or I know this, or if I was working with others, I'd be saying this, or I'll apply it to myself? How much was that, or was it just completely like, no, this is very different to what I'd normally tell somebody else in this position?
It's so different when you're in it. All I knew is I needed to fall apart to save myself and to find out who I really was. Not through somebody else, but really, and I didn't want to be saved. I didn't want to be with other people. I really needed that time. We're not good at crying in this country. Everybody says, oh, don't cry. And I thought, sod it, I'm not going to cry. I'm going to scream. So I did. And it went on for about 3 years, not every day like it was immediately. But in the meantime, what I was doing, I was also running death cafes on the boat. So I go to a place and tie up, and then run a death cafe, and then set off again. So I was kind of connected in and doing the work that I love to do. But in between the times, I was really, really doing my own work and dealing with what loss meant to me and grief. And I thought I knew it all. I thought, being a bereavement counsellor and a bereavement therapist, I knew what grief was. No, I did not. But I do now.
I think one of the things I've thought over in our journey with childlessness, especially in things like that, do you think there's a sort of almost which is worse sometimes? Is what you've lost, or like the future that you're not going to have that you thought you would? Would you have an opinion on that?
Oh, God, it's such a great question, isn't it? I have children, so I'm not losing them. Well, assuming I'm not losing them. One never knows these days. I think that's one thing that grief has taught me. You never know what's going to come around that corner at you. But I had a very, very dear friend who never married, and her great grief was the fact she was never going to be a grandmother. So it's a different kind of grief. It's loss, but it's so, all our losses are so personal to us, aren't they? And what they mean to us and what they mean to our future. Part of grief is grieving the future you'll never have. with that person or those people. Absolutely. And I think that's not spoken about enough in the whole grieving process.
Do you think people in the main appreciate that you can grieve and grief can be present with things that aren't sort of human life? Not just the death of somebody, it can be the death of something or the end of something.
Oh, we go through ends of cycles all the time. We just don't acknowledge them. And, if we were in living in tribal ways, we would be going through rituals and ceremonies to mark these beginnings and endings. And, you'd be held by the people around you within the community. Well, we don't have that in this country. We're all locked up in our own little houses, crying, making ourselves not cry and be stoic. And I just think we're missing a trick here. Grief brings us together. And I think it humbles us, especially in our first world countries. We've got it all, haven't we, really, inverted commas. I know some people would disagree with that, but, on paper, we're doing really well over here. I suppose it's that whole thing of I'm not perfect. I can't do that, or I've lost that, or my perfect life will never exist now because this has happened to me.
And it can be very difficult to go through something that people can't see in the same way as a bereavement. I think there isn't the pulling around you in the same way. Do you think that was harder because going through a separation or a divorce isn't the same as a bereavement, so you don't get maybe the same support? People maybe don't know how to support you. Did you experience that at all?
Oh, God, yes. I mean, really, and I've talked to a lot of people now who've been through the kind of experience I've been through. And all of us agree, I wish they died. It would have been easier. We'd have had a body. We could have gone to a funeral, done the whole thing. I would have still worn a wedding ring. It was huge to take off my wedding ring. I no longer call myself Mrs. All of those kind of things that I learnt about that caused me intense anguish and pain. Not being connected to somebody anymore, not having anybody special when I walked into the room. I'd always be looking out for him, having those moments, what couples do together. But I think that we don't talk enough about grief, and these losses are immense, and we lock ourselves away with them. Actually, I think the best thing to do is to talk about it. And, we're all in this together. Whether it's not being able to have children, or a child dying, or somebody walking out of a marriage, or getting cancer, or whatever it is, this is called the human condition. And I think that's helped me hugely to really embrace what happened for me. It's just part of my life story.
How long do you think it was for you personally? How long before you finished your grieving of the end of the marriage, or is it an ongoing thing? Have you finished grieving the end of your marriage?
Yes, I have. I've definitely finished it. But it was a bit like the menopause. I went through the menopause, and every day I was still going through the menopause, and it must have been a long time. I reckon I was going through the menopause for 10 years. And I remember one day waking up and I wasn't going through the menopause anymore. I was postmenopausal. And that definitely happened with my grieving my marriage and all that I lost. And I reckon that probably happened a couple of years ago. So it's 9 years on. It's 8.5 years on now. So it's taken that long.
Do you feel like you go through similar stages with that kind of loss that you might with a bereavement?
Well, grief is grief, isn't it? It's immense emotions that are triggered, or whatever you want to call it. It's just intense pain. And because your life has changed and you didn't ask for it to be changed. And I think I did not ask for this to happen to me, but it happened to me. And that's why I think it takes, when you're out of control of what's happening to you, and there is no way of being able to mend that, it's intensely painful. And I think this sort of sense of being out, hang on a minute, this is my life. What do you mean this is happening to my life? I don't want this to happen to my life. So I think there's that goes on too.
Did you find yourself ever asking the question why? Did you ever go down the route of why me, why now, why this?
Not really, did I? Well, maybe to start, not really. I just took it on the chin. I think there was this incredible sense of knowing that what had happened was right for me. And this sense of, hang on in there, girl, because this is going to be a hell of a bumpy ride for quite a while. And this sort of sense of knowing that one day I would come out of it and I would be who I really am meant to be. And I felt that happened. I'm a very different person now to what I was. And I would never want to go back to that marriage again.
That moment that you mentioned that you woke up and just felt like the grieving was over, what were some of the differences with the feelings? How did you feel mentally, physically, before and after that?
It's a process, isn't it? It's a long, long process when you're deeply grieving. Well, it is for me. I can only talk about my own experience of grieving, but I wanted it. I wanted it to be really sacred. I wanted this. Even if it was going to kill me, I wanted to do it well. That's what I felt. I wanted to grieve the best I possibly could, the deepest I possibly could, because I actually didn't want to take that pain to my deathbed, to be fair. Then when I realised, it wasn't sort of like I woke up one morning, it was over. It was kind of a sort of, oh, I feel freer. Oh, I don't feel depressed anymore. I was suicidal for quite a while over that year. I just couldn't see the point of living, really, because I felt the loss was so huge for me. And then that sort of went, and I suddenly thought, oh, do you know, I've actually enjoyed something today, rather than thought, oh God, how am I going to get through this? That kind of heavy, it's heavy, that feeling. How am I going to get through this? I don't want to be sitting here with these people. I don't care. That kind of feeling.
It really strikes me there's a clarity in the way that you talk about the very real choice that you made of I need to grieve and I'm going to grieve.
Yeah.
When you mentioned the sort of the rock bottom, and we listened to a podcast a few weeks ago with someone in a similar scenario, a lovely quote from them about one of the great things for them about hitting rock bottom was that it gave them the most solid of surfaces to rebuild from.
Yeah, that's a lovely thing to say.
Even though it took a long time, intentionally choosing to cry, to grieve, it feels and sounds a lot healthier than trying to just, okay, crack on, smiley face on, and I'm just going to push it down.
Because you're breaking inside. You know, you might have the facade on and, oh, jolly holly, but you feel crap. So I just thought, I don't want to, I'm going to give myself a chance to really go for it. And, you know, if it kills me in the process, so be it. I'll do whatever is needed. I didn't expect it to take that long. I didn't expect that, but it did. This sort of sense of, I feel deeply connected to myself now. What I realised, in my world, I had lost everything that I held dear to me. So there was nothing else to lose. Literally nothing else to lose for me. The only thing is my life. And I didn't, for a while, I didn't even care about that.
Once you'd set yourself on that track of this is how I'm going to be and I want to do this well, was there anything that would set you back occasionally? Would you see or experience anything?
Oh, God, yes.
What sort of things would they be?
Oh, it could seeing couples walking hand in hand down a street. That was really fun. I went to a wedding and I should not have gone. That really, really set me back. That was not good at all. Well-meaning couples who, start talking about we and us. That wasn't fun. Or we're going on holiday, or we're doing this, or we are doing that. That's a really hard thing for somebody whose their marriage has ended. It's a very stepping out of the we and us language is really challenging. So there was, things like that. It didn't take a lot.
How did you steel yourself to get to get through those? Did you just
Cried.
to grieve those well? Do you then grieve again for a while?
Oh God, yes.
How do you process that?
Well, gross, huge depression. I mean, really black depression. Crawling around on the floor kind of depression, yeah. And I learnt a lot about depression, and I really respect it. For me, it was an incredibly important part of the process, but it was agonisingly painful. I wish actually I'd broken my arm. It would have been less painful than the depression, actually. But I just think that's kind of part of the deal, you know.
Did you find you thought or actually did tell people on occasions that you were grieving, or have to try and convince people that you're grieving? Did you verbalise that process with others to try and sort of gain yourself some understanding or compassion?
Well, I went to a counsellor when it first happened, and that was really great, because I just said, I don't want you to say anything, I just want you to just be with me. And she was great. She really got it. And I chose well, because I chose somebody the same age as me. And she really was a wise older woman, and I felt really grateful to her. And every time I felt like I wanted to cry, I cried. But people lose patience with grief. They kind of think, well, come on, it's been a year now, you should be over that. Or it's not that bad. That, you know, or their life shit, and they'd rather talk about their life. So lots of people don't really want to hear stuff. Not really. I've never ever told anybody really what I went through. Nobody really knows. And it doesn't matter, because it's my journey, and I know what I went through.
Sort of sad that that's a situation. I think I would... I feel that a lot. I know what that feels like on a level. I would say childlessness is a similar thing. There's so many things along the way that will always make us sad, you know, and we have to accept that is part of the journey, and that's not going to end. But like you said, the sympathy, the empathy does. I get it's very difficult for people, and you probably found the same thing. You don't want people to change around you and not mention we and never be happy with their partner or with their children. But at the same time, you want them to be a little less like that in front of you. And it's a really hard thing to get right and to balance in your own life.
It is, actually. And it really helped when I stopped taking anything personally. You know, I was so emotionally raw, and I think the word is raw. I literally felt like I'd been ripped open from the inside out. You know, that kind of really raw, it's feeling of and you know, the thing is, people don't know what to say, and especially when it comes to childlessness, because our whole of society is about having children and getting married, and so I think you have you know, that's a big, really, really big thing that you're doing to talk publicly about that, because it's very hidden.
Yeah, it is an awkward thing. A lot of people go very quiet when you mentioned it. I actually tested it at a wedding once. I had people asking me, I was sitting next to various people, and they would say, "Oh, are you married?" I'd say, "Yes." "Do you have children?" Always the follow-on comment. And I tested lots of different answers. I thought, this is going to be interesting. So one person, I said no, and I just stopped it there, and that was awkward. Another person, I said no, that wasn't possible for us, and that was awkward. Another person, I gave them more details about the situation, and that was awkward. And I worked out there is no way, if someone else feels uncomfortable about it, there's no way you're going to make them feel comfortable. Even if you tell them you're open about it, it still doesn't mean they feel comfortable talking about it.
Even those people where we sort of give permission to ask us, because we're really open books and love to be vulnerable and love to share. And we found that even though we say to people, you know, ask us anything, you know, we really like to talk, we value conversation, but still that's not quite enough to get through to them, that, you know, to bring something out in them that they weren't expecting, maybe to bring an inquiring nature, or to take an interest, or to follow up. So it is tricky. I think it's been interesting to try different things with different people over different times.
I think it's because, you know, to them it's living the unimaginable. You know, I mean, it's sort of it's like when somebody's lost a child has died, and people will literally cross the street rather than speak to the mum or the dad, and we're so bad at this. We're so bad at loss. Because I think, it means vulnerability, doesn't it? And I don't know what to say because I don't know I don't know. Maybe I'm going to make it worse by saying something.
Is that a British thing? So are you talking about us as Brits or as humanity?
I do think so. I think the Western cultures are really poor at it. You go, I think it's much more accepted, or loss and grief is more ritualized in different cultures. I do. The not having children is a big one. It's a big unspoken one. It is. I think it's the same as a child dying. It's big unspoken.
It's interesting you say that, because I've said that to sort of close friends we've spoken to, and I've said to them, it hit me at one point that if we had lost a child, how people would be around us, the level of maybe, I don't know, sympathy, empathy. It's almost seen as one of the worst things you could go through. But the loss of children that you never saw or never had is almost like not much happened to you. And it's incredible. And I almost thought that maybe if we had a grave to visit of the children we never had, would we have grieved in a better way if we'd have made it a bit more solid? Because I think when we talk about it, we're going to do an episode of the podcast on just this, and I think we're going to talk about it on an invisible grief, because you're mourning something you never had, which is very complicated. It is difficult.
It is. It's incredibly complicated, because it's no less incredibly painful for you than if something like losing a child dying or whatever it is for people. It's your grief, that's your loss, that's what it is.
It's an unusual, and I suspect, I haven't asked anyone this, so maybe I'm speculating a little bit, but I suspect if you spoke to parents who had lost a child, they wouldn't not want to go through that to have not had the child, which was effectively the situation we're sort of in. So that is complicated as well, because that sort of plays with your mind, because you think, gosh, they've been through this awful thing, but they'd rather not be in our boat. What does that mean? And as a British person, when you're not taught to grieve well, that is very complicated as well. Because you think, I should probably be grieving this more than I am.
Because, the other thing is about grief and what you're, the courage you're doing about talking about this is absolutely wonderful, but it's lifelong. This isn't going to stop tomorrow. It'll come back at every stage of life, because that's what grief does. When somebody dies, or in your case, you can't have children, it's an ongoing thing that you both learn to live with. I look at the grief that I've had in my life. It walks beside my shoulder. It is my life companion. And I want it to be, actually, because I want it to remind me of who I am and the life that I lead. And it's that has led me to do this. And it's, leading you to do what you're doing, which is just such a gift for people. So in a way, that's how I look at the grief that I have. It's my shoulder companion.
I heard a quote a while ago that really helped me, that basically said, you make grief part of you. It's not something you get over. It's something that you incorporate. And that really helped me, because I was like, oh, okay, I don't need to get over this. It's just part of my story. Something I like to sort of ask people, because I'm sort of just curious really, but if you could go back and sort of say something to yourself, or maybe tell somebody who's going through it now, some word of advice or wisdom or something helpful to get you through it, is there anything in particular that you think would be the most helpful thing you could know?
Gosh, it's just sitting with people, isn't it? And going, look, I don't know your story, but I've been hearing my own story of what happened for me. And I'm here. Because you can't tell anybody anything when they're grieving. Nothing makes any difference.
Through your own grief that we've been talking about, have you been able to identify elements of good through that process? Are there things now where you can say, sort of, I'm pleased this has happened, or this has been good as a result of the bad?
Yeah. Well, it's led me to do the work that I do. I mean, that's what's been so fantastic. So I was just about, before the marriage ended, I was wanting to retire, actually. I didn't want to be a psychotherapist anymore. I just thought, I just want to hang out in life. So there was a sort of sense of stepping back, really. And the marriage ending has just completely forced me out of that. And I'm now in a space where I've never been more productive or creative or willing to be used by the universe in the best way possible, both, in any way possible, really. I'm a great believer in that. I feel very, very strongly attuned to something much greater than me. And I've lost my fear of life. I don't feel frightened of life anymore, where I used to. I don't anymore, because what else have I got to lose? I mean, it's done. I kind of feel it's done. And I don't have a fear of death, because I feel like I died. I've died twice in my life. Once was the plane crash, and once when my marriage ended. And I just feel that what do I feel? I feel just really connected to the life that I am leading until I take my last breath. And I'm very, very excited by that.
I'm already thinking it. How do I get there? Where do you start if you want to be that person?
I think you just got to go down, get dirty with yourself, and know it takes time, and know that you'll be feeling shit one day and okay the next. And then, and it's a rolling process, and owning it. I used to draw all the time. I used to draw what I was feeling, and go into the woods and shout and scream. I'd be on the boat, talking. I don't know if does talking about it help. Some people it does, but just owning it, But then I'm a lot older. I'm now 68, and I just feel like I'm stepping into a completely new phase of my life, which I look that the wounds I carry, and I'm really proud of my wounds now. I like having these wounds. They enable me to become an elder. And I take that role really seriously, because there's not enough of us out there. It's not about trying to fix anybody or platitudes. It really is about sitting beside somebody and just being there as they go through their growing process.
What you say about wounds, it certainly reminds me of a thought I occasionally have about scars, because there's two ways of looking at scars, isn't there? One being it's a reminder of something painful, and the other side of things being it's a sign of healing.
Yeah. Well, I've mucked up a lot in my life, and I don't muck up anymore. I don't make wrong decisions anymore. Oh God, I'm going to touch my head doing because I know how to listen to myself now. I know when my inner self just goes, Sue, don't do that. That's not a good idea. And I listen to it. It's uncovered. That voice is clear. And I like that. I trust myself. And I think before that, I didn't really trust myself. But the grief the depth of grief I felt, I think it was the one big thing for me was realizing that I was living on so much disappointment. I hadn't realized that my life was built on a whole series of disappointments until this happened. And that was a big key for me to really look at what disappointment meant to me, which was failure, being a crap person, all the stuff that goes on with disappointment. Not creating the perfect life, being the perfect person, all that nonsense. And it just enabled me to feel this is my life story. This makes a bloody big chunk in the chapter, and I'm really happy with that. I'm very happy to have it in my life story now.
I think something that's obviously been a huge part of that life story for you in this element, this chapter of your life story, was the narrowboat.
Well, I called her Mystic Moon. That's what she is. She was to me. She was the mystery of the moon, the Dark Mother. So she became my crucible. And people today still call me Mystic because of that. I'm so aware of the seen and the unseen veil, the seen world, which is our world, and the unseen world, which is just beyond this veil. And I'm very conscious of that. And it's made me much more attuned to something. There's something else going on with us. And I feel much, much more sensitive and connected to that. And I like that. I don't know about angels and guides. I have no idea. But there is something which gives me great comfort. And I'm not alone. I'd never feel alone now. Never. I was terribly lonely at times. I mean, really horribly lonely during a lot of these years. And actually all my life I've been lonely, but I don't feel that anymore.
Just before we start to wrap up and ask our final question, I'm curious about, I know that you've got this passion and heart for telling children and writing your Granny Mo book. So just tell us a little bit about where that came from.
Okay. Well, it's something that I didn't expect, and I'm learning to actually go with the unexpected. So last year during lockdown, I was thinking we need to do something more about helping parents and children to talk about death and dying. And this all came about because my little 4-year-old grandson turned round to me when I was in Hong Kong, and just as before lockdown, and said, "Granny, am I going to die one day?" And I went, "What do you say here?" And I thought, and I've been talking to adults about this forever, but my grandson turning around and saying, I took a great big deep breath, and his mother sort of went, "Oh my God, over to you," that kind of thing. And I suddenly thought, what we need is a book to sit down together and look at the whole concept of death written for a 4-year-old. So it must have been about November last year, I suddenly got this idea about, I wanted a granny, because I'm a granny. So I wrote a children's story called Granny Mo's Teddy Going to Die. And it just answers the questions that Jack asked me. Things like, well, what's going to happen to my body when I die? Or where do we go when we die? Those kind of questions. I mean, of course, nobody knows where we're going to go when we die. But it's answering it in a way that's acceptable and understanding. And I'm thrilled because it's just been picked up by a German publisher. So it's going to be translated into Germany, and it's definitely doing its work out there. So I'm really thrilled about that.
That's brilliant. What an important topic to put children's books out on as well.
Where can we direct people to if they want to find out more about the book or about your books or you yourself? Where is good to visit? Okie doke, because I write for adults too. It's suebrayne.co.uk, which is BRAYNE. My email is sue.brayne@gmail.com. So, or through my podcast, which is Embracing Your Mortality. So if you just pop in Embracing Your Mortality podcast, then I pop up there as well. It's about how do we live until we die? What does our personal mortality mean to us? So, yes, so I interview a range of people about just really inspiring people who are doing good work out in this world to help people live more consciously for a better world, really. Final question, we ask everybody this question on the Silent Why podcast. What's your Herman? So something that you have grown and fed into, something healthy that you can share with others. Through your experiences, do you think what would be the one or two things that are healthy and you can share with others?
Oh, embrace your mortality. Know that you're going to die one day. Really get real about it so you can start living and totally taking responsibility for your life and your story that you're writing. When death comes, the book closes. So how do you want your book to close? So that's my Herman.
A great question to think about from Sue. Would you have an answer if I asked you that right now?
Well, I hope it wouldn't end right now. It'd be a bit disappointing. Like a few more chapters.
We want to thank Sue for taking her time to share her honesty and wisdom with us. So much to take away and think about.
If you want to find out more about Sue, her books, podcast, blog, simply visit suebrayne.co.uk.
And we want to thank you for listening to our first episode. We hope it won't be your last, and that you'll continue with us on this journey as we explore loss.
We'll be releasing a new episode every week with a different story of loss, and we've already got some amazing guests lined up. And our own episode where we talk about the invisible, complicated loss of childlessness and losing something you never had in the first place.
I'm also releasing a weekly My Why episode and a blog on our website. You can find all this as well as our social media links on thesilentwhy.com, or just search for us on all the main social medias: Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Pinterest, LinkedIn at The Silent Why Pod.
And if you've heard something that's helped or encouraged you, or you just want to get in touch, we'd love to hear from you. Email us using thesilentwhy@gmail.com.
And we're going to end every episode with the words of someone much wiser than us. And this week we're kicking off with Eleanor Shellstrop from the TV show The Good Place. Wise words for when she's trying to help Michael in a crisis. Do you know what's really happening right now? You're learning what it's like to be human. All humans are aware of death. So we're all a little bit sad, all the time. That's just the deal. We don't get offered any other ones. And if you try and ignore your sadness, it just ends up leaking out of you anyway. I've been there. Everyone's been there. So don't fight it.